Creating community, culture, and bonding. While we dove into creating our learning center with the intention of creating a great learning environment, it's equally, and maybe even more important, for you to have a good social environment. For this to happen, it's important for you to be intentional about creating a positive culture. By culture, I'm not referring to your personal heritage or your upbringing or your family traditions. I'm referring to the expectations, attitudes, habits, and behaviors that teens at your learning center generally follow when expressing themselves and interacting with one another. Even if your attitude is that we have no rules or expectations about how people express themselves, that is still an intentional aspect of your culture. Another example of your culture may be how bullying is handled, or if there is any bullying to begin with. As Dylan Marcus shares about his experience at South Jersey Sudbury School, instances of bullying can be regulated through community culture without necessarily needing formal procedures for handling conflicts. As Dylan says, the school is small enough that if someone is being a bully, we'll just be like, all right, we're not going to hang out with you. And then they see that nobody's hanging out with them because they're mean, and they stop. That's happened. People were mean, and they stopped. If you're bullying people, it's almost laughed at, like, are you kidding me? Why would you do that? It's just mean and cruel. Reference 230. Some of the culture development will happen naturally, but it is also valuable to find ways to purposely create community. For example, when I worked at Not Back to School Camp, they had events specifically for building a culture of openness and acceptance, while also creating a bonding experience between the teens. One such event was a ceremony called Bonding Night, where teens would first hold hands and sing in a circle. Then they were paired up and shared their deepest beliefs with one another. And finally, they closed with lots of hugs. As a youth, I probably would have resisted such intense emotional connection. As an adult, I see that there is a tremendous lack of emotional expression in our society and have a deep appreciation for the fact that their camp culture emphasized connecting in such a way. Another event they held was called Seeing and Seen, where teens had a chance to share things about themselves that were not obvious, such as their religious beliefs, family struggles, sexual orientation, childhood abuse, medical diagnosis, or other personal struggles. This event purposely created a means for individuals to share things about themselves with the group in a supportive way which they didn't know how to do otherwise. Regardless of whether your approach is to include methods of developing intense emotional bonding, there should always be ways to create a culture that reflects what your learning community wants. Holding events like open mic nights where people can share music, poetry, dance, comedy, or other creative works are a fun way to connect. Even something as simple as having a weekly potluck lunch where everyone brings something to share with the group as part of a larger meal is a great way to connect. This is something they practice at an intentional community I've stayed at in Asheville, North Carolina, and it really is a great, simple way to make people feel a part of a group and to build friendships. Not all culture creation requires planning an event. An interesting example of spontaneous culture creation happened when naming the Peer Unschooling Network. I chose that name so it would be very clear what the website is about. After the site launched, I quickly started to dislike the name because it was long. I proposed to the teens on the site that we change the name to something like Peer School. The teens disagreed and explained that they don't even call it the Peer Unschooling Network. They refer to it as PUN. Interestingly enough, the term PUN doesn't have much meaning to it at all as far as the learning community goes, but the teens became really attached to it and identified with it, so we changed the logo to say PUN instead of Peer Unschooling Network. For a while, we implemented an idea on PUN which originated from some teens at Not Back to School Camp who joined the site. At camp, the teens do a daily check-in with their small advisory groups where they simply share how they are doing each morning. I remember them discussing how social media platforms like Facebook were a weird place to share emotions and experiences because they felt out of place, like people were begging for attention. However, they valued the ability to be able to share what was going on in their lives with their peers in a group setting where this type of sharing was accepted and encouraged. So we created a specific channel in the PUN chat specifically devoted to giving updates on how people were doing each day, and it helped improve the connections between people. The examples I've provided here are very specific to the communities I've interacted with. It's important not to get too caught up in the specifics of what others have done, but to simply see that there is value in creating ways of connecting with all the members of your learning center in social, non-academic ways. Schools tend to try and build culture through pep rallies, school dances, and sporting events, so you should feel free to adopt similar ideas or create your own.